Communicating responsible tourism. Are we? Oh, that's bad, huh? Ladies and gentlemen, are we all ready to start talking about communicating? We've got to communicate with each other. We're talking about communicating responsible tourism. Are we all ready to talk about communicating responsible tourism? Still not great, but it's better than it was before, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, you have a very fine panel here who are going to talk to you. They've been given very strict limits of 8 minutes. And as this room, the moment we finish with it, this room goes back to somebody else. It's not ours after 1:30. I'm really going to have to keep those time limits quite strictly, because what we want to do is give the maximum time for all of you to have the chance to ask questions and discuss things as well. So I'm going to call upon, without any further ado, Michael to make the first presentation, and then we'll just go through the presentations one by one, and then at the end we'll have the time for the questions and the comments.
Do we have contact? We do. So I've now got to try and talk about a very complicated thing that I'm criticising people for making too simple in 8 minutes. So there we go. No pressure there then. So my name is Michael Horton. I live and work in Cambodia, and I run an organisation that I started 8 or 9 years ago that tries to help lots and lots of people who go to places like Cambodia and volunteer and do other sorts of help. Some of which is helpful and lots of it is not so helpful. And this idea of travelling and doing things when you're travelling is a really growing area of tourism. And here I am again today to talk about a particular aspect of it. And this is called From Universal Good to Universal Problem, Volunteering with Children. 5 years ago I spoke here at World Responsible Tourism Day to highlight the issues around people volunteering in orphanages in developing countries such as Cambodia. If asked, I would give the same talk today, as the problem of unskilled, poorly prepared, poorly vetted volunteers responding to the highly emotive words orphan and orphanage are as relevant today as they were in 2011. Put bluntly, pulling together 40 or 50 children into a residential facility and calling it an orphanage is a relatively easy way to attract resources from overseas visitors. Weak regulation and enforcement encourage the establishment of more and more centres as demand from volunteers and other supporters increased. That 75% of children in a typical Cambodian orphanage are not orphans simply highlights the lack of childcare facilities in many developing countries. Because it's been easy for them to attract support, setting up an orphanage became the most likely option in a community, and children in crises of all kinds ended up in them, as there was no other facility available. In addition to orphans, poor parents sent their children there in the belief that they'd have a better chance than if they stayed at home. Children then get unnecessarily separated from their families, and they're extremely vulnerable. I ended my presentation in 2011 saying that people needed to switch their support to projects that served the whole community, which helped keep families together by identifying and addressing the problems faced by parents as well as the children themselves. This wouldn't only give support to disadvantaged children, it would also be much more appropriate support, and over time would gradually reduce the number of orphanages. Well, the good news is that over the last 5 years there's been a great increase in the awareness that not all volunteering is intrinsically good, and that volunteering in orphanages poses considerable challenges. The bad news is that through people's understandable desire for simple, clear guidance, the message is getting oversimplified and, ironically, confused. Volunteers are now becoming unsure whether they should be getting involved with any placements, especially those working with children. Through my work in Cambodia, I see volunteers who are concerned about their impact on local communities, especially those coming through responsible and ethical placement providers. For example, one volunteer in her 50s recently told me she was unsure about telling her friends and family that she was volunteering, as she thought they may criticise her. Without mature reflection and discussion, there's a danger that the community-based projects won't receive the resources that they need to do their work. The truth is there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to many volunteering questions. Take the seemingly simple issue of minimum periods for volunteering and the oft-quoted mantra, It's better to volunteer for a long time than a short time. Short volunteer placements with children are bad. Well, short-term placements certainly can cause problems if there's a constant stream of poorly supervised volunteers making inappropriate relationships and attachments with children. But equally, the wrong volunteer in the wrong place for 3 months can cause serious problems. On the other hand, whilst it takes careful planning, it's perfectly possible to have a very successful volunteer placement with children for an afternoon. Anybody here do magic shows for children? Or origami? Or read poetry? Or teach arts and crafts? Or play the guitar? Or could run a simple science experiment? So, is volunteering with children good or bad? To answer this question for a given placement, you need to ask a few more questions. Does the project truly understand the problems it's trying to improve? Does it have effective programs to deal with the problems? Why does it use volunteers? What do they do? How are they supervised? Why are local people not doing this work? What impact are the volunteers having on the local staff and children and community? After the volunteer has left, are local people more empowered and stronger, or more dependent on the next volunteer? My message today is the same as 5 years ago. Projects that work with the whole community and offer support to families as an integrated part of their work with children are a much better option for poor children and families than orphanages. Ironically, though we're seeing confusion amongst potential volunteers over orphanages and other projects, volunteer placement companies are still sending larger numbers of volunteers to orphanages. Many of these are groups from schools and other organisations who specifically ask to volunteer there. With increased clarity and awareness, this could easily be changed, as many of the activities that volunteers get involved with in orphanages are exactly the same as those in more responsible and appropriate projects, helping with teaching kids to learn English or to use IT, reading in a library, doing sports, arts and crafts, etc. Responsible volunteer organisations need to better understand the significant differences between orphanages and community-based projects. Things such as, crucially, the children attending will live at home, not at the project. In addition to classes and activities for children, there'll be programmes for adults, such as vocational training. There will be knowledge of the community's priorities and challenges. There will be support to help keep families together where appropriate. So, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Community-based projects have the potential to offer significant benefits over orphanages and avoid the problems associated with residential care. There are still many considerations to ensure a good placement outcome, but, done well, they are a much more appropriate way of using a volunteer's skills and experience. And finally, as an acceptance by me that people will always want complex situations distilled into brief, simple guidance, I offer this. Everything that volunteers do should help the local community to grow in skills and confidence. And I see a volunteer's role falling into 5 main areas. Number 1, understanding what the project is trying to do, including such things as the cultural, economic, social and local community dimensions. Helping the project team to achieve what they want to achieve. Sharing the volunteers' experiences, skills and culture in appropriate ways. During the placement, the volunteer may see and suggest new ideas or new ways of doing things. And if, and only if, the local staff are interested in following up on these ideas, the volunteers can then help to find ways they can be achieved. I guess that's my 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. And one of the reasons why this presentation is in this session and so on is that following your original presentation here and so on, there's been a huge debate within tourism about the role of volunteering, and that debate has totally changed the whole way in which people think about volunteering. So in a way, it's really communicated to the wider tourism industry and to consumers, I think, the issues around volunteering. But as Michael was maybe noting, perhaps it's been too successful now, and that it needs to be a little bit more nuanced in future and so on. So thank you very much indeed, man. Appreciate it. Next we have Tim representing Responsible Travel. And I think we have a PowerPoint presentation And another 8 minutes.
Maybe.
Not a second longer, not a second shorter, according to Harold.
Okay, hi everyone. I'll try and stick to time. I'm sure you'll remind me if I don't. I guess we were asked to talk at this because that's what we do. For those that haven't come across responsible travel, it is our business. We are a marketing platform for about 400 different responsible tour operators, operating about 5,000 trips. So you can see some stats there on the size of our site: 300,000 visitors every month, about 160,000 in our database. And I guess on the communication side, I hope I'm a little bit qualified in communication and travel, given my background is marketing director of TUI UK. So that's us. I guess I would distill our communication of responsible tourism through responsible travel into two ways. First of all, it's about trust, which I think is sadly lacking in travel. And probably lacking in the world for those waking up this morning. I think we're going backwards in a trust environment. But then I think this is only part of the equation, which I'll talk about briefly. Really, it's about inspiration. And I think marketing responsible tourism, marketing responsible holidays, in that way is no different to marketing, a mainstream holiday, city break, or all-inclusive, which, same principles apply, just you won't find them on our site. What you will find on our site is these three principles about being really honest, and we are a digital platform, so everything we do is about trying to win in the world that's dominated by Google, and then giving customers the issues and a way to pick their way through the issues. So primarily our driver of traffic to people's responsible holidays featured on our site is through our travel guides. We have about 250 of those, and now it'll be increasingly through film with our own film editor on the team. And our guides work partly because of the sorry state that travel is in terms of honest content, but also because they're written in such a way that give a full picture of a destination. We say what's bad about a place, we say when not to go, we say what not to do, we say what's overrated, at the same time that we're telling you all of the highlights, all of the key elements. And the reason these come at the top of Google rankings, and the reason we do so well in driving traffic to our tour operator members' holidays, is because this honesty is really not only recognized and rewarded by Google, but also by customers. You have to assume that they are clever enough and wise enough to find out what a destination is truly like. So just by painting a false picture of paradise and trying to gloss over any responsible tourism issues you might have in your destination, frankly, you're kidding yourself. And to say that you have none is also kidding yourself. We all know that there are responsible tourism issues in every walk of life, in every destination, in every type of holiday. Why not confront them, be honest about them, allow customers to make that decision for themselves? We also supplement that by honest reviews. Difference with TripAdvisor is you actually have to go on one of the holidays on our site, and responsible tourism becomes a big part of the questions we ask them. And then every single trip on the site not only openly confronts the responsible tourism issue in that destination or with that type of holiday, but we ask every operator to talk about making a difference. How a customer choosing that particular trip will make a difference. It can be small, it can be about recycling, it can be about sticking to the paths, it could be about avoiding plastic bottles, but it is a simple guide on every single trip that how someone can actually make a difference. So I would put all of that under a simple banner of trust. I think responsible tourism, more than any other, needs to sell on trust. We need to create a bond with customers where that level of trust is there, because I would argue in other sectors of tourism it certainly isn't, because we create this false world of paradise. We gloss over the issues of a destination or a type of holiday and assume that the customer will believe us. And I think increasingly in this age, in this age of information, that is no longer true. But where I think our challenge for marketing and communicating responsible tourism is the same across any sector, and it was the same when I was at TUI and First Choice, and it's the same at Responsible Travel. First and foremost, it has to be about inspiration. Sadly, we know that the traffic to our site and the search terms on our site, only 10% will be looking for green holidays, eco holidays, responsible holidays, whatever sort of search term that associates around responsible tourism. That is small. What people are looking for is, in this case, best time to go to Iceland, best things to do in Cuba. They're after the experience. They're after something that's going to change their lives, something that they've been dying to do, something they've been wanting to do for years. And that's something, whether you're selling a responsible holiday or you're selling a normal mainstream holiday, is equally applicable. You have to inspire. You have to get somebody excited about a holiday, a destination, or a type of travel. And then I would also argue that just because it's responsible doesn't mean you can't get away from the basics. And we see so many poorly presented holidays, whether they're responsible or not, in fact, where the user experience, and assuming you're in an online world, which I think most of us are, the user experience has to be correct, and particularly it has to be correct for mobile. If you have the call to action buttons in the wrong place, if the photography doesn't render, if the file sizes are too big, these are all really, really basic. But I'm still standing at these events talking about really, really basic stuff about digital presentation. And we spend a lot of time on this. It has to work for a customer in their hands. It has to be something that's easy to digest and easy to see. And if it isn't, and it doesn't work on mobile, doesn't matter whether it's responsible or not, the customer's not going to buy it. And lastly, I would say travel, yes, it's about honesty, but that inspiration comes from amazing film and amazing photography. We don't spend much on photography. It's amazing what open source on the internet you can get and the source of images you can get. But film is the future, and I see lots of stats about total internet searches being 70% will be involve film in some way by 2019. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. What you can certainly see is film is playing an increasing part in marketing holidays in general, and certainly marketing responsible holidays. So much so that in July, as I mentioned, we've employed our own film editor, and she now makes films for us and only us. And I think, if again looking back at the open source availability of content, you can do it extremely cost effectively. And I think if you haven't got film on your site, if you aren't using film to market your holidays and to market responsible tourism in general, you're missing a trick. Just two other tools that we used. We used the power of celebrity. It's as applicable for us as it is for the Daily Mail. We take folks we love and we get them to talk about their inspiring trips and how travel inspires them. And I would encourage you to do that again, because they love our brand, because they love us, because they love responsible travel and responsible tourism in general. They're happy to work with us. You're not paying exorbitant introduction fees. And then we're also an activism brand as well. Hopefully you saw the World Responsible Tourism Awards yesterday, which we organise and have done for 13 years. We see that very much as the carrot, where it's rewarding the fantastic examples of responsible tourism we see around the world. But we also have to recognise that there's irresponsible tourism everywhere. And if we've got 350,000 people viewing our site every month, again, there's a great opportunity to showcase some of the campaigns that are out there, and again, giving customers some very simple calls to action, simple ways that they can get involved, and simple ways that they can make a difference. So I won't show the film. I will stick to time, but I was going to show one of our films that our new editor has made. But so if I was going to summarise, I would say honesty and openness. I would put under that banner of trust. You have to create that bond of trust with a customer. But more than that, marketing responsible tourism is like marketing anything in travel. It has to come from inspiration.
First of all, thank Tim on your behalf, and so on again. If you have any questions, please hold on to them. And I'm very sorry that we didn't get a chance to show Tim's film, but I'm sure at the end he'd be delighted to tell you how you can access that film for yourself and look at it for yourself. So in the meantime, very slickly and very quickly, Christopher has moved to the podium. So can we invite Christopher to begin his 8 minutes, please?
Good morning. Oh, good afternoon, I should say. It's lovely to see you all. It's nice to be in this room away from the noise of downstairs, isn't it? And maybe it gives us a moment just to reflect on, is tourism really doing enough to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, to meet the Paris Agreement, to help save the environment that tourism needs? I don't think it is. And I think the elephant, or elephants in the room, one of them is the visitor. We don't seem to want to really engage sufficiently the visitor. So building on the last presentation about honesty and directness, I think I will try and keep to that theme through my presentation and demonstrate a real-life example. So what I want to talk about is how can we engage the visitor to use less resources and contribute to the environment and have a better holiday. How can we do that? There is not a lot of example for us, and there's a lot of skepticism that visitors will actually play ball and want to do it. So after some years of frustration and annoyance, because I did believe that they did want to, I decided to do some research to demonstrate if it was possible. And I'm going to show you these research findings today, and I'm looking forward to answering very difficult questions later so you can test me on it. Okay. So I chose 4 cottages in New South Wales, Australia, which I own, and I've metered them so they record exactly how much electricity, gas, water, firewood that the guests use by the minute. So I know exactly what they're doing. And I built a system which is called a biomimicry system, which is essentially we are replicating nature. That's what the system's seeking to do. Because in nature, there are lots of guides of how to use less. And these really need to be conveyed back to people from the city who have forgotten perhaps how to do that in new and unfamiliar environments. Remember that when you go on holiday, if I invited you all now to come with me to visit my property in Kangaroo Valley, do you know what to pack? Do you know what the weather's going to be like in the night, during the day? And will you understand how to use the facilities in the cottage? Do you feel that way whenever you go and stay in any accommodation in any part of the world? It's not always clear. So the system helps us from a biomimicry point of view. For example, why do 70% of Australia's animals sleep during the day and work and eat and have fun at night? Because it's rather hot. So rather than all the white Anglo-Saxon people that are determined to treat Australia rather like London or New York, the fact is that from a biomimicry point of view, we can see there are other ways of living in that environment. The second part is that I've trained people to be able to deliver a responsible tourism message in a persuasive way, without upsetting the guests and getting them to reciprocate and join in and enjoy it. And thirdly, sequential techniques, what that means in everyday language is communication tools set at different stages of their stay. And that's helped us save a lot of resource. So first of all, in answering the brief of this presentation today, we're talking about advocacy and marketing. I've split these points into 2 slides. So from an advocacy point of view, I use research. I use the data from exactly how much we've consumed per year and look at all the savings that we've made, and I can show our guests how much effort we've taken. Building from the previous presentation, honesty, directness, showing them that we're trying. And then, as you can possibly see from that small slide, that we then say, hey, how about saving a further 20%? How about helping us? So then we make recommendations. Recommendations because when you go into an unfamiliar accommodation in an unfamiliar building, you don't know how to use some of the infrastructure. You don't know what the weather's going to be like. So do you open the windows or do you not? Why is that important? Because natural ventilation is a lot less expensive than turning the AC on. We've got to the point where we're forgetting that we can open the window. I even have to explain to people that the fly screens that we have on the windows have locks so they can have the windows open at night, because people in the city are frightened of people coming into their accommodation at night. So we've got into these situations where the host needs to build confidence with or the guest needs to build confidence in the host about using the infrastructure to help them use less resources. So you need to guide them. And what happens to all the financial savings that I make from all the energy and water? Do I keep it in my Swiss bank account? Or, I haven't got one, or do I actually invest it in a charitable cause in the local destination that will add value to the guest stay? So we do obviously the latter. That's a baby wombat. A lot of our wombats are hit by tourists driving along. See, now you're all taking photographs. You see how persuasive it is, right? People love to see this, and they love to see, well, you're asking me to save, Chris. You've been honest and direct. I'm going to do it because I can see where the money's going to go, and it's going to help local nature. That's a good reason. Okay, you've got me there. And lobbying. So I come to London and I show you this. That's part of persuasion. We're sharing, collaborating, sharing innovation. That's critical, and that's also part of what any responsible tourism business should do. From a marketing point of view, we have communication materials. So we have a sheet of paper when people arrive that explains to them what the weather's going to be, what comfort suggestions, tips to keep cool at night or hot in the day, whatever you need to do, activities that relate to sustainable supply chain options in the local destination. But we don't use words like that, obviously. But appropriate activities for the weather. And then they get a further one the following day that tells them how much resource they've used compared to the 20% saving compared to the best performing guest. What do you think of that? See, they go, whoa. Now they accept it because I have been, as said previously, honest and direct. And so exactly as you've taken it, it's common sense and acceptable to hear that. We also have co-created experiences that come through this. For example, all the food scraps go into a bucket in the cottage and they can take it down and feed the chickens. So that way the food waste reduced. But also keeping warm is part of a co-created experience because they can walk around the property, collect wood and put it in their fire and heat themselves that way. So there's lots of ways of reducing energy, reducing water, making contributions that actually are a better experience overall. It's not a better experience turning the switch on, is it? And the air quality isn't that great either, is it? But it's much nicer to hear the birds. It's much nicer to smell fresh air. And a connection to place by giving them the idea of going out and seeing things. We give them things called bicycles. And they go out and they ride about and they see nature. They slow down and it gives them a better experience. You get the drift. I'm going to run over my 8 minutes, I think. I've got 1 minute. Okay, very briefly. And it builds relationships. I don't think he's telling the time right there. He's got a different watch. So the results are that a 30% increase in consumption by people who are the control. Now, I'm presenting the figures that way because there's lots of ways of presenting statistics. But these were done simultaneously on the same types of weather conditions on the same days. So when the intervention guest that received all that communication, they use less than the control at the same time using a third. A third of the energy, a quarter, or around a quarter of the gas and water. What was the cost of that? Now, collectively, as I don't have a lot of time, you're going to say, but were they still happy, Chris? Same level of satisfaction, but critically, look at the middle point just here. Those that had not received the intervention said, eco-feedback, not too sure. Those who received it, they were okay about it. Those that received that sheet every day, 3/4 said it added to their stay. So the point is you can go do co-created experiences from a low-cost platform that I would like to share. This is a sales pitch for any destination or accommodation provider that would like to trial my product. It helps you improve your benchmarking and so forth. It helps you improve your communications and normalizes local cultural factors, such as in Australia we can talk about water saving because there isn't any. And by doing that, we are #1, still ranked in our destination by TripAdvisor, We've got the green leaders, and we don't have any comments negatively on this after 17 months, 1,000 guests. So I open up by saying we're not doing enough. I'm now prepared to share this with you. So I'm looking forward to having long conversations with you afterwards. Thank you.
You make me feel so mean having to keep everybody to time. Last of all, Javi, who many of you will know has been working in this field for a number of years and is ready to go with his presentation, having taken a picture of all of you and himself.
Yeah. Well, you've taken pictures of us. I thought it was about time I took a picture of you. Yeah, there we are. So knowing a little bit what was going to happen before, I thought I was going to talk about 5 different advantages of communicating sustainable tourism. But then I also wanted to look at some of the dangers, because I thought otherwise it's just far too easy to go home and say, isn't this all great? I think there's a number of things we can do if we want to reduce our impacts. I'm still surprised at the number of cities and destinations I talk to that is still saying we want to get more hotels to be sustainable and so on. And I say, actually, the best thing you can do as a city is target markets with shorter flights and make sure that people stay for longer. And they said, oh no, the airport is too important for us. I will never get voted into power again. I think, tough. Do you really want to be responsible or not? I think we need to normalize sustainability. I'm tired of looking at sustainability like the strange thing on the shelf. Okay? We just need to make sustainability be the default product. You know, a little bit like, how many times have you gone to a conference and said, if you're vegetarian, tick here, right? And you're thinking, let's do it the other way around. Everybody gets a vegetarian meal. If you want to eat meat, tick here, right? And why are we still doing this today? You have responsibility as a tourist destination because you're both a buyer and a seller. How many destinations do I talk to that expect the tourists to be the one to buy the green product? And I always say to them, but as the government, you are the single largest buyer of catering services, restaurant services, hotel beds, transport. You need to introduce sustainability purchasing requirements as part of your purchasing process. And until you're prepared to do that, do not expect somebody else to do something you're not prepared to do yourself. Okay? They don't like me. By the time I'm saying all these things, they've gone away. And then target appropriate customers. Stop bringing customers that you know will create havoc. Okay? Hen parties, gone. Stag parties, gone. Club 18 to 30s, gone. Particularly, don't take any of those to a Muslim country where they're going to be doing ridiculous things in a place where they wouldn't normally do. And I say Muslim country for an example, we could continue. If you want your customers to change their behavior and help you reduce resources, ask nicely. The example here on the right-hand side is from a cafe that basically said, look, we're doing all these things and all you have to do is put me in the bin. Then I'm going to do it, because there's a rule of, you've done 90% of the work as the supplier, you only ask me to do the last 10%. Be trustworthy. We've talked about this, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. But show me where things come from. Be honest. Stop saying that you're going to eat sustainable food when you come tonight. Nobody knows what it is, okay? But if you tell me I have great local suppliers, then I know what to do with that. Be humorous. The sign in the middle, you probably can't see from the back, says no smoking and makes your breath smell and your teeth go horrid, as well as being a danger to the people who live in our forest. Trust me, you put this at the height where your children see it, and you're not going to smoke for the entire duration of staying in this particular place, because your children are your best police. And finally, be engaging. Make sure that actually people remember what you're going to do, because otherwise it's not working. If you want to attract more customers, obviously this will differ whether you look at business travel, conference, leisure. But you have to make sure that your product is unique. You can't pretend that you'll get away with selling a product this vanilla flavored anymore, okay? You need to be seen. Your website needs to look good enough, and I think we've already heard about this, but obviously being seen is not good enough, then you need to be found. So you need to make sure that the distribution channels and the opinion leaders actually think something good about you and talk about you somewhere. Not only you need to be found, but then you need to be remembered, because actually a lot of people will, go passing through your website at some point, and then they'll move away. And besides being remembered, then you need to be shared. You need to make sure you've got some stickiness. That actually people will want to say something good about you, and they'll want to forward the message, frankly, so you have to spend less on your own marketing. You need to help improve customer satisfaction, and surely we've all heard that it is easier to keep a customer coming back and to get somebody recommending you than to gain a first-time customer. Okay, so how do we do that? We have to make the customers feel good. At the bottom right-hand side, there's a sign here. This is part of a booklet that a particular hotel group has that says, "Who made my breakfast?" And every double page has photos of the people who provide produce. This same hotel always serve the same breakfast, but once they introduced the booklet, customer satisfaction questionnaires about the perception of the quality of the breakfast went up. Same taste for the sausages, same yogurts this lovely, delightful lady has brought to them for a long time, but now we've made a service tangible. And by tangibilizing that service, we've made people want to buy it. We need to make it really clear for the customers what's in it for them. Okay? If we keep saying this is about the planet, you're going to do very, very well with about 5% of the market. Tim said about 10%, despite your brand, 10% of your customers are looking for that. If you can make a living out of 10% of the customers, that's fine. I personally need the other 90% as well to pay my bills. So if you tell the customers what's in it for them, they're much, much more likely to come back. Okay? You need to really make it easy, so it has to be the default choice. So at the top right-hand side is a photo from Barcelona where runners actually were always encouraged to throw the bottles in the bins. They never did it, so they decided to put basketball hoops on the bins. Oh boy, there's something about male psychology that if we can score, we have to. Okay? So actually, there's no bottles on the floor anymore. There's no signs telling you plastic is bad for you, you should do this for the planet. You know, just make it really, really obvious and tempting. And the final one is, give me information that allows me to take decisions I wanted to take. So in the same way that Chris said, people wake up in the morning and say, "Ooh, I wonder whether it'll be hot today. What shall I do?" He's already pre-thought that and has given information to the customer that is not going to make the customer feel annoyed, but the customer will find helpful. I don't think I've spoken this fast in my life. Increase your customer expenditure. Make sure your customer actually is ready to buy the product you've got. So at the right-hand side, we've got a baby puffin. They're cute. They live, they're born near my home area in Yorkshire, and the cafe is near this particular bird reserve. During the week or the month when these little birds are born, instead of serving you cappuccinos, they sell you capuffincinos, which basically means the chocolate sprinkles are in the shape of a puffin, and they tell you we're celebrating only 3 miles from here, these little ones are born. Much, much better than a leaflet, much more persuasive. Okay? And also by the end of the month when the puffins are gone, what do you do with the rest of the leaflets? You can still use the chocolate sprinkles. 50 things to do before you're 11 and 3/4 year old. If you haven't seen this campaign from National Trust, absolutely brilliant. I'm not going to tell you anymore. But you need to give customers things to do. You need to improve their experience. And look, in the same way you buy a mobile phone package and they give you minutes, texts, and data, and you probably didn't want all three, but you buy because it's a bundle and they make it look much better. Let's bundle what the product that the customer wanted with the sustainable experience they didn't yet know they wanted, and then you give them a more complete package, particularly when the fixed costs of the sustainability experience are quite high, but the variable costs are relatively low. So there's very little kind of additional cost to you in selling this. I'm getting there. Increase your customer loyalty and reduce seasonality. I am tired of seeing websites, say in Barcelona where I come from, that right now, on the websites for all these businesses, will only have people wearing bikinis and swim shorts. Because fundamentally, you've just told me, do not come back until July. Those same businesses are complaining they've got seasonality. Idiots. Okay? That's my answer to them. Because you brought it up on yourself. Okay? So, I've talked to people in Bali about the fact that you can sell yoga holidays when it rains as a much more tranquil moment of doing yoga. You can actually experiment the place much better, besides which there are no midges at that time of year. Okay, there's no bugs, and so on. Add me a calendar. The bench here at the bottom right-hand side has a little sign on the back that says, "Well done. The first 5,000 bottles you recycled allowed us to make this bench so you can enjoy the view." I am much more likely to put the plastic bottle in the bin with a well-done message. Anybody who's a father or a mother, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You say to your kids, don't do something, that's exactly what they do. You praise them, and they're more likely to respond. I wanted to just have time to actually look at this one. The dangers of over-communicating sustainability. First of all, if you moralize, you're dead. Okay? Customers are on holiday. They've saved for 51 weeks of the year to come and do something quite often that they would never do at home. Okay? Let them. Okay? If you moralize, they're not coming. If you're too assertive, you'll scare them off. They're not coming back. They'll react negatively. If the cost to them, either financial or in terms of making them change their behavior, is much more than what they're prepared to do, they're not going to come back. There is something called reactance that we studied with one of my PhD students that basically showed that as a result of having increased people's awareness of polar bears disappearing for climate change, number of trips to Svalbard in the Arctic Circle has gone up by 300% per year. And people are saying, I want to see them before they die. And you think, I won't tell you the word, but I mean, you causing them to die faster because you decide to fly there. There's a rebound effect, okay? People tend to do something because you told them they couldn't do it, and the final one is even worse. Quite often we say, hey, my customer has just not consumed that, but there's a moral licensing effect. Every time I am good and I have a salad, I believe I deserve an extra glass of wine later on to compensate for it, okay? So, but if I just measure how many people consume the salad, I'm thinking I'm doing really, really well. I need to actually look at the bigger picture. If you like any of that, all my consultancy work has now moved from something that used to be called Respondico and now is part of Travindi Consulting, and you'll find manuals and tips and news and examples and all that over here. Thank you.
So thank you very much to all our panellists, and that is the quickest I've heard you speak, certainly Javier, and I've never known an academic who can finish in less than 15 minutes, let alone 8, so I congratulate you in particular on that presentation. I now take on my role of moderator, which means running around the room with a microphone for any of you who have any questions or comments. There's a microphone here for our colleagues on the panel to respond to you. Who would like to be first? Thank you. Oh, good. It's always good when it's somebody near the front. Please bear in mind my age. So if you're sitting in the back, come further forward and so on if you want to ask a question.
Thank you. Thank you all. Andy Rutherford from Fresh Eyes, People to People Travel. In the spirit of honesty. Upstairs, downstairs. I've just spent the morning, went around about 20 stalls, national, not business, and no one could, me as presented as a tour operator, provide any information or context there for responsible, sustainable travel. So, what do we do? In the spirit of looking towards next year, in other areas, there's direct action, there's all these percentages, there's disincentives to not do, and all that sort of thing. So, Javier, based on your issues there, honestly, how do we confront this? And I won't go on about, it's still, after 5 years, impossible to get public drinking water in this building.
No, I know it's really hard, and there's about 4 tourist boards down there that have asked me and Travindi to advise them on how to market and communicate sustainability. They've asked me questions such as, if City X is aiming to be a sustainable destination, how should our marketing be different? And when you present them with some of this data, they look relatively frightened, at the prospect. On the other hand, some of the destinations we've talked to look at this and say, oh, I didn't know we're already doing this. So we are already marketing sustainability in a kind of an implicit sort of way. But probably we're still at the stage where this is not the right venue downstairs, and a lot of these companies really are not ready, and we will have to find them in some other ways. The challenge is that having individual companies in a destination to do this, and the rest of the destination isn't doing it, is not going to work, is it?
Could I ask if any of the other panelists would like to come in on that question as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. No one's interested down there, especially if you're talking to national tourist bodies. I think it's not where I was expected to come from at this stage. I would imagine the 5 you spoke to within there will be great businesses that are doing fantastic things. And if at this stage it has to be driven by the private sector and it has to be driven by individual companies rather than at national level, then so be it. Great if it's driven from the top and the bottom, but you've just proved it isn't. So, a good example from the awards yesterday is we had our first ever nominee from Dubai, which frankly, as a judge for the awards, we nearly fell off our chairs when we realised there was someone that had a chance of winning, for their work on turtle conservation. So, the fact that there's one in Dubai gives us some hope. But I wouldn't expect Dubai downstairs to be advocating responsible tourism in any way yet.
In my opinion, I think we need to revolutionize tourism. We have been running like this for 40 years, and it's a bit boring now, and can't we come up with something new? And as I'm 57, and most of you not, I would suggest that you, with us, need to start to develop new tourism concepts. It's not just tweaking what we've got. We need to take a revolutionary step forward and provide far more sustainable tourism concepts. The people that are working downstairs and doing their best today, selling or buying, are not necessarily the innovators. It's down to us to show them the way forward.
Well, I'll have to join in, won't I? Yeah. People going and volunteering, it's a really significant niche of tourism, and it's one that needs to be very responsible, and it isn't, and that's what I spend all my life doing, trying to get that part responsible. And the problem we have is that there are usually at least 4 players in the chain. So you'll have a school in Australia who wants to come and do something in Cambodia, and they'll be dealing with an outbound guy in Australia who's dealing with someone in Cambodia who's trying to talk to us about going to the school. And people are wanting to do things that are quite unhelpful for Cambodia, but they think that they're going to be helpful. And once we finally get the school teachers in front of us, we have a great chance to make next year's trip really responsible and really useful, because they then begin to understand what is really needed in that village. And once that's happened, great things begin to move. But I've been doing this for 10 years now. I'm 58, so I'm even worse than you, mate. And within the industry and within some of the bigger players, I see the move, the change being quite slow. But if we can get people to truly understand what the issues are, and the problem in the industry is that lots of people don't understand what the issues are. The industry is trying to meet the demands of its customers, which are the guys that want to come and do things, and we are here trying to meet the demands of the people in Cambodia who need that help. And it's not impossible to marry those two together, but you need to understand what they are.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please. Leading the second one, then I think we'll take the one from the lady behind as well and try and take them both together to speed things up.
I recently went on a hiking trip up to a volcano in Lombok, and we chose to go with a responsible company, planted a tree, and those kind of things. But we got a lot of feedback from other travelers that did not realize how bad the situation is up the mountains. They didn't realize that there were so much trash. If they would have knew that beforehand, they would have chosen as well a green company to go up with. And I think that's a situation for more cases, is that travelers don't realize until they reach the destination, and that's often when they already made their arrangement. How do you see any opportunities to reach these people before?
Thank you. So we'll bundle the questions up, I think, and then...
Hi, I'm a responsible travel blogger. I actually started my blog recently talking about responsible travel because I've been traveling to Vietnam, for example, last year, doing a cycling trip, and we were very shocked about the way tourism could be actually developing there. So my question is actually, I've noticed that my audience, for example, is not so much interested into the responsible travel part, but more into the experience and adventure side of the traveling. I think with millennials' rise, there is an opportunity here to really focus on experience and adventure, much more on the responsibility part. So do you think that communication should be also more made by destination towards this kind of opportunities, experience and adventure?
So I think both of those were very consumer-oriented questions, I suspect, and so on. Who'd like to take the first response?
I'd just make a quick comment, because you both raised issues about do people actually want something and it's not provided. And I just want to reconfirm and re-emphasize they do. It's the system that's not giving it to them. So your opportunity as young people, as young innovators, is to start making the product that they want to buy. Javi has explained to you very clearly that you don't have to use words like responsibility or sustainability, but we need the product. We need to go out and people will buy it. It's not a question as if, it's a question of providing it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think we focus very much on its adventure, its experiential travel first, and then at the current state of the market, just because of where I see where Google searches are, the secondary message is, oh, by the way, all of these trips on this site meet certain responsible criteria, but our site is 30% up since we flipped those messages round and stopped trying to talk about travel like a local and actually start talking about fulfilling dreams, really doing the experiences you want to do, and then having the secondary message as around responsibility. It might be a sort of sad indictment of where society is at the moment, but we are a more successful business as a result of flipping those round, and I can live with that because we're selling more responsible holidays. I think your point about Lombok and about education is great, and I would, we use every opportunity talking about these amazing adventures and amazing experiences to also educate, which is why we talk about activism, which is why we still run the awards and still focus on that, because you're right, as soon as someone knows about orphan tourism, the bad sides of it, and as soon as someone knows about elephant trekking, for instance, everybody instantly doesn't want to do it anymore, but they're quite happy to have their Facebook homepage with a picture of them on an elephant because it's blissful ignorance. So it is an education process, but I would do it on the back of selling adventure.
Excellent. We're just trying to get as many questions as we can, so if you can be as short as possible with the questions, please.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for a very inspiring session. And I think my question is more addressed to Michael, but I would love if anyone else wants to comment. So a year ago, I came up with the idea of inventing responsible tourism, meaning I didn't know about the industry itself. I just came up with a concept. And my concept was to promote and organize authentic and responsible travels to Russia, where I come from. And we decided that we want the travelers to contribute back to the society by being the ambassadors of their own country and enabling the change that's needed in Russia, which is the global mindset that the youth is lacking. So we did decide to support an orphanage house. It's a banned word here, but we did decide so. And we decided that it's really nice if people will be able to come and give a little pitch in an interesting way about their country and help these kids get inspired and learn languages. So my question to you is, how can I overcome this generalization of the bad support of the orphan travels? And I know for sure we support a very much established organization. It's not exploiting the topic, but since it's kind of a banned idea, how can I overcome this generalization? And yeah, thank you.
8 minutes, eh? Well, I don't know what orphanages are like in Russia, but in developing countries, what happened was that it was absolutely pure and unfettered supply and demand. And it was supply and demand on its head. It wasn't the demand from Cambodian kids that developed orphanages, it was the demand from people who wanted to go and do something in them. And the Cambodian government's actually now doing quite a lot to control orphanages, and they've closed quite a lot down. And things are moving, things don't happen overnight. So that was the problem, that it was encouraging unskilled people to start orphanages. And all of us here have probably had, a fairly decent education. I couldn't run an orphanage. It's the most difficult thing in the world to do. Think of all the skills that you need. And people were starting to run them without those skills. And there were some wicked people, but there are also lots and lots of people with good hearts who soon ran out of the capacity to be able to do things properly. So in the example I was talking about, it was a sort of self-generating pool of not very good things. And, as British people, we can't sit here and be very smug about orphanages. We nearly invented the damn things and then exported them all over the world. But over the last 50 or 60 years, we have made great efforts to try and find other ways to look after kids in crisis. Still, there are times when children have no option but to go into residential care. So I don't know, the devil is really in the detail. There may be a real need for the orphanages that are running in Russia. There are real needs for residential care homes in Britain. They're still there. I think the danger is when you link the two things together and you make it some sort of tourist attraction, or somehow you make that connection, or you encourage people to run things because they can get funding from them that maybe are not really needed. The big thing I think is whether a child is staying in your project, let's call it that, or whether they go home. And if kids are staying in a project, then really I don't think volunteers and visitors should be going. And I don't know, maybe you can, what we're trying to do now is you cannot close all the orphanages tomorrow. I mean, what can you do? But it's a gradual process. And so maybe if you could get some more information about where society thinks they should be going in Russia, and then you try and support that process, that might be a more positive thing to do.
Hello, good afternoon. A number of global businesses have communicated that as part of their climate change strategy, they're going to reduce their travel. How do you combat the message and the communicated message, business or leisure traveler, that traveling itself is not responsible? How do we combat that?
Okay, that's a good question. I think part of the reason when Justin Francis set the business up, we didn't call ourselves sustainable travel. We started with responsible travel, was because 40% of our traffic, our business is from the UK, which is an island, so flights are involved. I think the flying element is intrinsic of travel and provides what we view as benefits to a local community which outweigh the damage that's done through flying. It's really tricky. At the moment, we don't see any alternative to flying coming up, but we see huge benefit to local communities that experience the benefits of flying that bring those travellers to their communities. So it's tricky. It's really it is really hard. Our message is if you have to fly, make your flight count, and think about the reason you're flying. Cut out the ones you don't need to do, whether that's business, whether that's conferences, whether that's World Travel Market, whatever that may be. But make it count for a holiday that makes a difference. And some of the lessons that we heard today as well. Go for longer, and make sure that at least the benefit you're getting is going back into the local community.
Eric, as always, you're on the money. That's the problem with having you in the audience. You can just have this ability to, cut through all the bullshit. I'm working with the government of Catalonia, which is where the city of Barcelona is, and we've decided to put a matrix, a 2x2. Trips that will be rated on how good they are for the local economy, or bad, and how good they're going to be for the local environment or local society, and bad. And everything that's in the quarter that is good for the environment-ish, better than 50%, and good for the economy, that's the target market. Everything that's good for the money but bad for the environment, how do we increase length of stay, or how do we change mode of transport? Everything that's good for the environment but bad for the economy, how do we provide meaningful experiences, people will stay longer? And if it's in the bottom quadrant, and I'm not going to tell you what fell there, because I'll lose my job, but if it's bad for the environment and the opportunity cost, basically the money they're making out of it is very low, we need to demarket those segments big time. I'll let you see the marketing plan when it's written and approved.
Yep, okay. My question is around scale and volume, because what we heard on the panel relates a lot to small scale or special interest or niche tourism. And I was intrigued on the Responsible Travel website. There was the we like and we don't like. We don't like mass tourism. And so now I understand a bit more because you're selling the experiences and so on. But I think we need to be careful not to indicate that mass tourism can't be responsible, or if that's what we think, how do we then address that? Because it is the biggest part of the pie, and it's the glasses of wine that Xavier was referring to, and not the few salads that we're eating. So how do we communicate to the mass tourist? Is it the same message? Is it a different message? What does the panel think?
No, it's another good question. I think, I still think we sell relatively big companies. I would include Exodus and Intrepid as relatively big, and they might not call themselves mainstream, but they're still big operators. It's more. I mean, mainstream gets banded around as a bad word, but I think lots of my previous job. With TUI, I wouldn't. We did a lot to try and sell better mainstream holidays, but
in the same way that there are chains of pubs and restaurants that are saying, "I will still sell red wine, but I will not choose a wine that's 15% alcohol. I'll go for 13%." And I'll find ways in which I'll change my menu so it still includes some meat, but not only it's better quality meat, but it's a much more balanced diet, and so on. I think we need to just work with every sector of our industry to make it a little bit more responsible. Because if we basically say that sector, call it golf, call it cruising, it can't be responsible. It's just giving them license to continue being the way they are.
Yeah. Okay, we have time for... Sorry, unless anybody else wants to contribute.
Only that I go back to what I said before. It needs innovation and a revolution. We can't just do tweaking on the side of what we've already got, because the impacts are not good from the environmental point of view. We need more substantial change, which means the concept of the holiday has to be sustainably rooted right from the very beginning, and not minor alterations. And so I don't agree with you in the sense I just don't think we're moving fast enough. I've been coming here for some years, and I'm hearing similar things, and I don't want to sit on this stage to say that. I think we have to make major, major changes, and we all have to collaborate and work together to do that, which means fundamentally restructuring what the holidays are going to be and how far people can go. I'm talking about rationing. We can't, why we in the West can possibly continue to consume like this is just beyond me. We can't do this, and we're harming other parts of the world. We all know this. So as you all know this, we all have to start with ourselves and lobby and persuade from our own positions to create a much more substantial tipping point.
My name is Neshka Victor from Green Heart Consulting, and attaching to the previous question and the bad word of mainstream, is it actually not our goal that responsible travel becomes the mainstream? And on the back of that, does it not make sense that we do show and sell our to our clients that the holidays that they are taking are actually part of or an extension of a responsible lifestyle in general, so that so-called responsible tourism is no longer just responsible tourism as a niche part of the wider picture? Thank you.
Okay, I think we have one more person nearby who wants to ask a question as well. I think that will then be the end of the question.
Okay, Tom Salanim from the Finnish Nature Center Haltia, and from tourism business for 26 years. Actually, a comment to the question about national tourism boards. I think we have some example in the Nordic countries. You go downstairs, look at Norway, powered by nature, or the best example of Iceland, who's actually, I think they've read Xavier's all points, and they're making responsible tourism fun. So there are examples of mainstreaming responsible tourism, and we can look at what Iceland has done. Another question is it sustainable?
Thank you very much. So can we ask our panel to respond to those two questions, please, then, to finish this session?
Just on Iceland, I think, having just been there and just spoken at a conference there about it, I think, yes, there's some great stuff going there, responsible tourism, but I think for me the biggest issue with Iceland is over-tourism and the lack of regulation and a boom and bust that's inevitably going to happen in their tourism industry to follow their financial industry. Yeah. I've forgotten the first question. Sorry about that. about
mass market becomes mainstream, responsible tourism becomes mainstream.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the responsible has to be how we holiday in the future, and I absolutely agree. It has to be the norm. The origins of responsible travel are through the Body Shop. Anita Roddick provided the seed funding to the company and helped set it up, and the model was the same as the Body Shop, is that if it's just one little shop in Brighton and it doesn't show the world you can make money out of being kinder cosmetically, then it's a failure. What the Body Shop did was show that you could be financially successful and not test cosmetics on animals. Our model is exactly the same. We are unashamedly a profit-based business, and we want to grow, and we want to show the mainstream that it is possible to make money and be a successful business and pay our staff salaries out of only selling responsible holidays. And we'd like nothing better than more mainstream companies to copy us and to replicate us and to only sell responsible holidays, however that is classified.
But going back to Chris's point, we're all really, really good at pointing fingers at somebody else. Okay, I wonder how many of us are prepared to do 12 months without flying. And I'll just leave it at that.
And I think that's probably a very good way to end, isn't it? So, ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf, can I please thank your panel and so on for their contribution.